So we will have a respectful but firm discussion, which will consist of saying, this is how things work. You too have set prices that are higher than those imposed on you. That's settled. And we are familiar with this threat. By the way, in Biarritz, during the G7 in 2019, we had pretty much the same thing. So we will settle all this respectfully through discussion. But it won't happen in this way.
At the G7 in France, is Emmanuel Macron now daring Donald Trump to actually follow through on his threat of 100% tariffs, turning a leaders' summit into a high-stakes showdown over trade and power? As the French Navy quietly prepares for a possible Hormuz deployment, is Macron publicly schooling Trump on diplomacy and economics, positioning France as the steady hand in a volatile crisis? Even before the first group photo, did Macron just fire the opening shot in a new transatlantic trade war, answering Trump's tariff threats with a very public, very pointed rebuke? With sharp words on Iran, tariffs, and European sovereignty, is Emmanuel Macron emerging as Trump's biggest challenger at this G7, willing to confront Washington in front of the cameras? As Donald Trump arrives in France for the G7, Emmanuel Macron is rolling out a new plan for securing the Strait of Hormuz, signaling that Europe wants its own voice in Gulf security. On June 15th, Macron said France could move quickly to help reopen Hormuz once a U.S. Iran deal is in place, promising that Paris would not wait on others to stabilize shipping lanes. The French leader added that mine-clearing vessels could be deployed within days, making clear that European navies are ready to take on a frontline role in clearing the strait. Interestingly, Macron also brushed off Trump's threat of 100% tariffs on French wines and champagnes, insisting that U.S. pressure will not dictate French or European tax policy.
Yes, we must believe in it. We must do everything to implement it. And so, this agreement is a good thing, because it's what we've been hoping for weeks. First, we will do everything and mobilize starting this evening as part of our work, and tomorrow as well, since we won't just have the G7 members, which are the 7 major democratic economies in the world. We have brought in partners. And tomorrow we will have a session on the issue of Iran, in particular with Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. We will do everything first to ensure that this agreement becomes a reality, and therefore that the Strait of Hormuz can reopen peacefully and that traffic can resume. If the next few days show us that things are going well, we will deploy with the British and lead this mission. And so, as I was saying, the French can be proud because their military will be able to participate in the stabilization in the coming hours. It is in the coming weeks that we will have an impact on oil prices. I don't want to create a fictional scenario here, if I may say so. In any case, we are ready, and within 2 or 3 days, the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier can be on site. Now, we must do it in an orderly fashion. I can tell you that as early as tomorrow, we can have fighter jets, aircraft that will be there for initial surveillance missions. We can have a frigate as early as tomorrow, and we can indeed have, within 2 or 3 days, the Charles de Gaulle mine-clearing capabilities and everything that accompanies the Charles de Gaulle. That is to say, also the frigates of our partners and the rest. But all this only makes sense if there is an international agreement. That is what we're going to work on.
U.S. President Donald Trump threatened France this morning with 100% tariffs on wines and champagnes if Paris doesn't eliminate the tax targeting American tech giants. Will you give in?
No, because that's not how it works. We just concluded an agreement between Europe and the United States on tariffs after months of negotiations. It was finalized last summer. Now we need stability. What we're going to demonstrate, and what expert reports show, is that tariffs don't benefit anyone, especially tariffs between G7 countries. They don't benefit the economic sectors affected here. But they don't benefit the United States either, because they don't solve their trade problems at all, and they increase certain prices. So, this digital tax, the Europeans decided on it. Several countries implemented it. It's part of our law. It is not for the United States to decide what European or French law should be, and that's normal. And it won't be any different, at least not as long as I'm here. So we will have a respectful but firm discussion, which will consist of saying, this is how things work. You too have set prices that are higher than those imposed on you. That's settled. And we are familiar with this threat. By the way, in Biarritz, during the G7 in 2019, we had pretty much the same thing. So we will settle all this respectfully through discussion. But it won't happen in this way.
In France, Donald Trump met with Emmanuel Macron first, before sitting down with the rest of the G7 leaders, setting up an early test of how tense the summit will be. The U.S. president's positions on trade, defense spending and Iran have already strained relations with key European allies, and this summit is expected to expose those rifts again. Trade disputes, NATO burden sharing, the war in Ukraine and the Iran conflict are all expected to dominate discussions, leaving little room for a calm, photo-op-only gathering. The emerging U.S. Iran agreement and the impact on global energy prices could end up overshadowing the entire summit, turning side meetings on oil and sanctions into the real center of gravity. U.S. President Donald Trump has declared an end to his military campaign against Iran, signaling a major shift toward diplomacy. In a post on Truth Social, Trump called for global oil markets to return to normal operations following the pause in hostilities. His statement marked a notable departure from earlier rhetoric that had been interpreted by many as support for regime change in Iran. During the conflict, U.S. policy appeared to evolve from discussions of regime change toward a more pragmatic diplomatic approach. Trump has since stated that he never cared about regime change in Iran, according to reporting by the Wall Street Journal. The U.S. president also described Iran's current leadership as the most rational group the United States has ever dealt with. This comes after Trump had initially signaled support for Iranian protesters at the beginning of the conflict. The U.S. president also spoke about the possibility of a broader transformation of Iran's political system during the early stages of the war. Despite weeks of military strikes, the Iranian state remained intact and no large-scale uprising ultimately emerged. In the aftermath, Iran was able to disrupt global energy markets through the closure of the vital Strait of Hormuz. The resulting economic shock contributed to oil market volatility and increased international pressure for a negotiated settlement. While a recent deal has paused the conflict, major questions surrounding Iran's nuclear program remain unresolved. Iran state-affiliated Mehr News has published what it says is a 14-point draft agreement outlining a potential framework for a U.S.-Iran deal. According to Mehr, the reported draft begins with an immediate and permanent end to military operations across multiple fronts in the region. The United States would pledge not to interfere in Iran's internal affairs under the reported framework. Washington would formally recognize and respect the sovereignty of the Islamic Republic. The U.S. would lift its maritime blockade measures within 30 days of the agreement taking effect. American forces deployed around Iran's periphery would be withdrawn as part of the proposed arrangement. The Strait of Hormuz would reopen under security and transit arrangements coordinated by Iran. The draft also reportedly includes the release of $24 billion in frozen Iranian funds. These assets would be unlocked during a 60-day negotiation and implementation period. Half of the funds would reportedly become available to Tehran before formal talks begin. The reported concessions would represent a major economic lifeline for sanctions-hit Iran if implemented. Iran secured changes to Strait of Hormuz provisions during the final hours of negotiations, according to Iran's Tasnim news agency. Tehran pushed for revisions to the draft agreement. The IRGC-affiliated Tasnim reported citing an informed source. The source said issues related to management of the strategic Strait of Hormuz were among the last changes negotiated. Tasnim said Iran also secured the addition of language guaranteeing Lebanon's sovereignty within the proposed framework. A clause affirming Lebanon's territorial integrity was reportedly inserted during the final hours of negotiations. Iranian sources said the Lebanon provision became an important factor in Tehran's calculations during the talks. Tasnim claimed Tehran subsequently shelved a planned military response to an Israeli strike on Beirut's Dahiyeh district. The source said Iran viewed the new language as a concession that directly benefited Lebanon's interests.